in the noisy streets of Jakande Estate, where Lago's sun baked the zinc roofs until they sang, and where everybody knew everybody's business before breakfast, there lived a woman called Grace. She was 28 years old with eyes that still remembered how to smile, even when her body carried bruises like unwanted jewelry. Her husband, Mr. Tony, was a spare parts dealer at Ladipo Market, who believed that a man's fist was the best way to communicate with his wife, and that church was just a place where women went to gossip and waste money on offering. Together they lived in a 2-bedroom flat that echoed with silence during the day and screams at night, because Grace was married to a man who hated God more than he loved anything else. From Monday till Sunday, Tony had one rule: no church, not on Sunday, not on Wednesday, not even on Christmas Day. If Grace as much as hummed a worship song while cooking, he would shout from the sitting room, "Woman, are you singing that nonsense again? You want me to reset your brain?" And Grace would swallow her song like bitter medicine and continue frying her stew in silence. One Sunday morning, while Tony was polishing his car outside their compound, Grace stood by the window watching families walk past in their church clothes. The women wore wrappers that swayed like colorful flags. The men held Bibles like briefcases, and the children skipped ahead singing choruses that made Grace's heart ache with longing. "Tony," she said softly, not turning from the window, "please, can I just go to church today? Just this once. I promise I will come back early and cook your food fresh." Tony looked at her like she had just asked permission to fly to America. "Church?" he repeated slowly, dropping his rag. "Grace, are you testing me this early morning? Did I not warn you about this church matter?" Grace turned to face him, her hands clasped together like someone already praying. "But Tony, it is Sunday. God's day. What is wrong? What is wrong?" Tony interrupted, his voice rising like smoke. "I will show you what is wrong." He marched into the house, grabbed her arm so tight that his fingerprints would later bloom purple on her skin, and dragged her to the bedroom. "You want to go in church, Abby? You want to go and tell those your church people that your husband is a bad man? You want them to pray deliverance prayer for me as if I am possessed?" "No, Tony," Grace pleaded, tears already forming. "I just want to worship. That is all." "Worship?" He laughed bitterly. "The only worship you need to do is worshiping me. I am your Lord and Savior in this house. Now go and cook my food before I lose my temper completely." That was Grace's life. Every Sunday felt like prison visitation day, where she could only watch freedom from behind bars. Her neighbor, Mama Tundi, who sold groundnuts at the junction, often saw her standing by the window during church hours. One day she asked, "Grace, why don't you ever go to church? Are you a Muslim now?" Grace smiled sadly. "No, Ma. My husband doesn't allow it." Mama Tunde's eyes widened. "Doesn't allow? Since when did going to church become something that needs permission? Even my husband, who drinks like a fish, still lets me go every Sunday." Grace looked down at her slippers. "Tony is different." "Different?" Mama Tunde adjusted her wrapper. "That one is not different. That one is trouble. Mark my words." But Grace had already marked too many things. She had marked the walls with her tears. She had marked the calendar with the days she survived. And she had marked her body with the evidence of Tony's anger. The beatings were not daily, but they were reliable. Anytime Grace mentioned church, anytime she prayed too loud, anytime Pastor Johnson from Victory Chapel sent her greeting through a neighbor, Tony would transform from human being to hurricane. He would slap her like she was a mosquito, punch her like she was his punching bag at the boxing club, and then afterwards, he would act like nothing happened, asking her what was for dinner as if he didn't just use her face for target practice. Grace's mother, Mama Grace, who lived in Ibadan, had visited once and seen the bruises. She grabbed her daughter's hand and said, "My child, is this how you want to die? Leave this man before he sends you to your grave." But Grace shook her head. "Mama, I cannot just leave. Marriage is for better or worse." "My dear, this is not worse," her mother replied seriously. "Oh, this is wickedness." "There is a difference." Yet Grace stayed. Not because she was foolish, but because leaving felt more dangerous than staying. Where would she go? What would people say? And deep down, she still hoped that one day Tony would change. That one day he would wake up and realize that the woman he was destroying was the only person who still prayed for him even after he bruised her prayers into silence. The thing about Grace's suffering was that it didn't happen all at once. It grew slowly, like mold in a damp corner, spreading until it covered everything. In the beginning, when they first got married, Tony had been different. Not perfect, but at least he smiled sometimes. He would buy her ground nuts from Mama Tunda's stall and tease her about how she ate them like a squirrel. But after his business partner cheated him out of 2 million naira, something inside Tony broke. And instead of fixing what was broken, he decided to break everything around him, starting with Grace. The first time he hit her, it was a slap, just one. He had come home angry about a customer who refused to pay, and Grace had asked the wrong question at the wrong time. "Tony, did you remember to buy the kerosene?" His hand moved faster than her brain could process. The slap echoed in the room like a gunshot, and Grace stood there, her cheek burning, too shocked to cry. Tony had stared at his own hand as if it belonged to someone else, then muttered, "You made me do it," before walking out. That night, Grace convinced herself it was a mistake, an accident. But accidents don't repeat themselves every week for 5 years. Then came that Wednesday evening that would change everything. Grace was peeling yam in the kitchen, humming softly to herself, when she heard a knock on the door. She wiped her hands on her wrapper and opened it to find Pastor Johnson standing there with his wide smile and his Bible under his arm. "Good evening, Sister Grace," he greeted warmly. "I was passing by and the Holy Spirit told me to check on you." Grace's heart immediately started beating like a guilty drum. She glanced behind her nervously. "Pastor, this is not a good time." "Not a good time?" Pastor Johnson looked confused. "My sister, when is it ever a bad time to receive God's word?" Before Grace could respond, Tony's voice boomed from inside. "Grace, who is that at the door?" Grace's face went pale. "Pastor, please, you have to go now." But it was too late. Tony appeared behind her like thunder before lightning. When he saw Pastor Johnson, his face twisted into something ugly. "What is this nonsense? Grace, did you invite this man here?" No, Grace stammered. "He just came to what?" Tony shouted, pushing past her. "Pastor, or whatever you call yourself. What do you want in my house?" Pastor Johnson remained calm. "Good evening, brother. I just came to greet your wife and—" "My wife?" Tony laughed harshly. "So you people are now following people's wives to their houses? Is this what you pastors do? Chase married women? Brother, please, it is not like that," Pastor Johnson said gently. "I am just doing pastoral care." "Pastoral care?" Tony moved closer, his fists clenching. "Let me give you a care you will never forget. Get out of my compound before I show you that I am not one of those your weak church members." Grace grabbed Tony's arm. "Tony, please. He didn't mean any harm." Tony shook her off so violently that she stumbled against the doorframe. "Don't touch me, woman. This is your fault. You've been telling these people our business." Pastor Johnson's eyes darkened when he saw how Tony pushed Grace. "Brother, there is no need for violence. I will leave. But please, do not raise your hand against your wife." "Are you telling me how to handle my wife?" Tony roared. "In my own house? Pastor, leave now before I commit sin against your head." Pastor Johnson left, but not before giving Grace a meaningful look. As he walked away, he whispered loud enough for her to hear, "Sister Grace, God sees everything, and very soon he will fight for you." That night, Tony beat Grace worse than ever before. He accused her of inviting the pastor, of gossiping about him, of trying to embarrass him, and Grace, curled up on the floor, could only pray silently that God would remember her, even though she couldn't go to his house. By morning, her left eye was swollen shut, and her lip was split like overripe tomato. But she still woke up, made Tony's tea, and ironed his clothes, because that was what she always did. Mama Tunda saw her through the window and rushed over. "Ah, Grace, what happened to your face?" Grace tried to smile, but her lip cracked. "I fell." "Fell?" Mama Tunda's voice was sharp with disbelief. "Grace, you fell or somebody pushed you? Because that eye is not looking like accident to me." Grace said nothing. What could she say? That her husband thought beating her was the same as loving her? That every punch came wrapped in jealousy and control? "Listen to me," Mama Tunda said seriously. "That your husband is a dangerous man, and one day he will go too far. Mark my words." But Mama Tunda didn't know that her words were about to become prophecy. The following Sunday, something strange happened. Grace woke up and Tony was not in the house. She checked the sitting room, checked the bathroom, checked everywhere. His car was gone. His phone was off. And for the first time in years, Grace was alone on a Sunday morning. She stood in the middle of the sitting room, her heart pounding with possibility. Church was happening right now. Just 15 minutes walk away. The praise and worship would be starting. If she hurried, she could make it for the sermon. Just once. Just this once. Her hands trembled as she reached for her best wrapper. She tied it carefully, avoiding the bruise on her waist. She wore her headscarf, the blue one she bought 3 years ago, specifically for church but had never used. And then she looked at herself in the mirror. "Grace," she whispered to her reflection, "today you will worship God." She hurried out of the house before fear could catch her. The morning sun was bright and forgiving. Children played football in the street. Mama Chioma was sweeping her compound. And somewhere in the distance, Grace could hear the church drums calling her home. When she reached Victory Chapel, the gate man looked surprised. "Sister Grace, I never see you before for church." Grace smiled despite her swollen lip. "Today is my day." She walked into the church and immediately burst into tears. The presence of God was so thick she could taste it. The choir was singing, "What a mighty God we serve," and the sound wrapped around her like a blanket. People turned to stare at her bruised face, but she didn't care. She had come to meet God, not people. She found a seat at the back and closed her eyes. And for the first time in years, Grace worshipped freely. She raised her hands. She sang off-key. She cried until her tears washed some of the pain away. Pastor Johnson saw her from the altar. His eyes widened, then softened with understanding. When it was time for testimony, he called her forward. "Sister Grace, would you like to share with us how God has kept you?" Grace hesitated. Her whole life she had been hiding her bruises, hiding her pain, hiding the truth. But something in Pastor Johnson's eyes told her it was safe to speak. She walked to the front, her legs shaking. The microphone felt heavy in her hands. She opened her mouth and the truth poured out like water from a broken dam. "My name is Grace," she began, her voice cracking. "And I have not been to church in 5 years because my husband beats me every time I try." The church gasped collectively. Some women began to cry. Men shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Grace continued, her words gaining strength. "He beat me last Wednesday because Pastor Johnson came to visit. He beat me yesterday because I hummed a worship song. And if he finds out I am here today, he will beat me again. But I don't care anymore, because I realize something. If I die hiding my faith, I die twice. Once in body and once in spirit. So today I choose to worship God, even if it costs me everything." The church erupted in applause and prayers. Women rushed forward to hug her. Men promised to talk to Tony. And Pastor Johnson held her hand and said, "Sister Grace, you will not face this alone anymore." But what they didn't know was that Tony was not missing. He was sitting in his car outside the church compound, watching everything through the window, and his face was darker than a midnight without stars. Grace spent the whole service in the presence of God. She prayed. She danced. She received prayer from the elders who laid hands on her bruised body and commanded healing. And when church ended, she felt lighter than she had felt in years. She walked out of the church, still smiling, still humming. That was when she saw Tony's car parked across the road. Her blood froze. Tony stepped out slowly, like a lion that had been waiting for its prey. His face was calm, but his eyes were filled with murder. "Grace," he called out softly. "Come here." Grace's legs refused to move. Pastor Johnson noticed and quickly stepped between them. "Brother Tony, good afternoon. We are glad you came to fellowship with us." "Move," Tony said coldly. "This is between me and my wife." "Brother, whatever is between you and your wife, violence is not the answer." Tony laughed bitterly. "Pastor, you are testing me. Grace, I said, come here now, before I come and get you." That was when something unexpected happened. The men of the church stepped forward, forming a protective wall around Grace. The women began to pray loudly, and Tony for the first time realized he was outnumbered. "You people want to fight me?" Tony shouted. "Because of one useless woman? She is not useless," Pastor Johnson said firmly. "She is a child of God, and we will not let you hurt her any more." Tony's face contorted with rage. "Grace, if you don't come now, don't bother coming home at all." But Grace, standing behind the wall of church members, finally found her voice. "Then I won't come home." The words hung in the air like prophecy. Tony stared at her in disbelief. Then his expression changed. He smiled, but it was the kind of smile that came before destruction. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay, you people have won today, but this is not over." He got into his car and drove away, leaving a cloud of dust and dread. That night, Grace stayed in the church's guest room. She couldn't go home. Not yet. Not when Tony's eyes still promised violence. Pastor Johnson's wife, Sister Maria, brought her food and sat with her. "My dear, you did the right thing." "Did I?" Grace asked, staring at her hands. "Maybe I should have just endured. Maybe I should have endured?" Sister Maria cut her off sharply. "Sister Grace, endurance is for traffic, not for wickedness. That man was killing you slowly, and you had every right to save yourself." But Grace couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was coming, and she was right. The next morning, Monday, Tony didn't go to work. Instead, he went straight to Jakande Estate police station. He met Sergeant Bello at the counter, a man he had done business with before. "Ogre Tony, good morning." Sergeant Bello greeted. "Wet and bring you this side?" Tony leaned in, his voice low and urgent. "Officer, I need your help. My wife has been kidnapped by a church." Sergeant Bello's eyebrows shot up. "Kidnapped? By church? How?" "That Victory Chapel," Tony said seriously. "The pastor there has been having an affair with my wife, and now he has brainwashed her and is holding her hostage. I went there yesterday and they refused to let her come home. They even threatened me." Sergeant Bello scratched his head. "This is serious matter, oh. You sure say na kidnapping and not say she just a vex?" Tony's eyes blazed with fake sincerity. "Officer, I know my wife. That pastor has used jazz on her. You need to arrest him before he destroys my marriage." What Tony didn't know was that Sergeant Bello's own sister attended Victory Chapel, and he had heard about Grace's testimony the day before. But Sergeant Bello was a smart man. He knew how to handle men like Tony. "Okay, sir," he said slowly. "Make we go there together? I will investigate this matter properly." By noon, Sergeant Bello, Tony, and 2 other officers arrived at Victory Chapel. The church was empty except for Pastor Johnson, who was in his office praying. "Pastor Johnson!" Tony shouted, bursting through the door. "Where is my wife?" Pastor Johnson looked up calmly. "Brother Tony, good afternoon. Your wife is safe." "Safe?" Tony laughed mockingly. "Officer, you see? He is admitting that he is holding her. Arrest this man now!" But Sergeant Bello raised his hand. "Pastor Wetton happen?" "This man say you kidnap him, wife." Pastor Johnson sighed deeply. Then he reached for a file on his desk. "Officer, I did not kidnap anyone. Mrs. Grace came to church yesterday and testified that her husband has been abusing her for years. We gave her shelter because she was afraid to go home. Here are the pictures we took of her injuries." He handed the file to Sergeant Bello. Inside were clear photos of Grace's swollen eye, split lip, bruised arms, and finger marks on her neck. Sergeant Bellow's face hardened. "Olga, Tony, now you do this thing?" "She is lying," Tony shouted. "That woman is dramatic. She probably did that to herself to frame me." "Frame you?" Pastor Johnson's voice was quiet but firm. "Brother Tony, your wife has been suffering in silence for 5 years. 5 years. The only crime we committed was giving her a voice." Then Pastor Johnson did something Tony didn't expect. He pulled out his phone and played a recording. It was Grace's testimony from the day before, her voice breaking as she described years of abuse. The whole church service had been recorded. Tony's face went pale. You recorded her?" "We record all our services," Pastor Johnson said calmly, "for people who cannot attend. But in this case, it became evidence." Sergeant Bellow looked at Tony with disgust. "Olga, this is not kidnapping case. This na domestic violence case. And if you like, we go change the script now and make you be the one we go enter cell." Tony's confidence crumbled. "But officer, she is my wife. I have right to wetten?" Sergeant Bellow interrupted. "Right to beat her? Olga, I beg Parkwell. This matter don't pass you." Then the door opened and Grace walked in. She had been praying in the guest room when she heard the commotion. Her face was calm, but her hands were shaking. "Grace!" Tony's voice softened immediately, switching to manipulation mode. "Baby, please come home. I am sorry. I will change. Just give me one more chance." Grace looked at him for a long moment. Then she said quietly, "Tony, you have had 5 years of chances, and you used every single one to hurt me." "But I love you," Tony pleaded, tears suddenly appearing. "I can't live without you." "Love?" Grace's voice broke. "Tony, love doesn't beat. Love doesn't control. Love doesn't forbid someone from worshipping God. What you had for me was not love. It was ownership. And I am not property." The room fell silent. Sergeant Bellow cleared his throat. "Madam, do you want to press charges?" Grace hesitated. Part of her still felt guilty. Still felt like a wife should protect her husband even when he didn't protect her. But then she remembered the woman in the mirror that morning. The woman who chose to worship despite the cost. "Yes," she said firmly. "I want to press charges." Tony's face transformed from fake remorse to pure rage. "You will regret this, Grace. You think these church people will take care of you? You think Pastor Johnson will marry you? You are making a mistake." "Maybe," Grace said softly. "But it is my mistake to make." The police took Tony away that afternoon. As they led him to the van, he was still shouting, "This is not over, Grace. You hear me? This is not over." But Grace felt something strange rising in her chest. It took her a moment to recognize it. Freedom. The next few weeks were difficult. Tony was released on bail and immediately began spreading rumors. He told everyone at Latipo Market that Grace was a prostitute, that she was sleeping with Pastor Johnson, that she used juju on him. The lies spread faster than truth ever could. But something beautiful happened. The church rallied around Grace. The women brought her food. The men helped her find a job at Sister Maria's hair salon. And Pastor Johnson connected her with a lawyer who agreed to handle her divorce case for free. Grace moved into a small, self-contained apartment near the church. It was tiny, but it was hers. No shouting, no fists, no fear, just peace. One evening, several months later, Tony showed up at Victory Chapel. But this time, he wasn't angry. He was crying. Pastor Johnson met him at the gate. "Brother Tony, what brings you here?" "Pastor!" Tony sobbed, falling to his knees. "I need help. I don't know what is wrong with me. Why do I hurt people I love? Why can't I stop?" For the first time, Pastor Johnson saw something real in Tony's eyes. Not manipulation, but genuine brokenness. "Come," Pastor Johnson said gently, helping him up. "Let us pray." That night, Tony confessed everything. How his own father used to beat his mother. How he grew up thinking violence was normal. How he was terrified of losing control, so he controlled everything with his fists. And how losing Grace made him realize that he had become the very monster he swore he would never be. Pastor Johnson listened without judgment. Then he said, Brother Tony, what you need is not just prayer. You need counseling. You need to learn how to be a man without using violence. It won't be easy, but if you are willing, God can change you." Tony nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I am willing." The journey wasn't quick. Tony joined a men's support group. He attended anger management sessions. He read books about healthy relationships. And slowly, painfully, he began to change. 6 months later, he wrote Grace a letter, not begging her to come back, but apologizing for everything he put her through. He didn't make excuses. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He just acknowledged the pain he caused and took full responsibility. Grace read the letter alone in her apartment, and for the first time since leaving, she cried not from pain, but from release. She never responded to the letter, and she never went back to Tony. But she heard through Mama Tunde that he was doing better, that he was helping other men overcome their violent tendencies. And Grace, she bloomed like a flower that had finally found sunlight. She became a hairdresser at Sister Maria's salon. She led a women's support group with passion and wisdom. And eventually, she went back to school to study counseling so she could help other women professionally. One Sunday, a year after everything happened, Grace stood in front of Victory Chapel to give her testimony. Her face had healed completely. Her smile was genuine, and her voice was strong. "When I was in darkness," she began, "I thought God had forgotten me. I thought suffering was my portion. But God was just waiting for me to take one step of faith. And the moment I walked through that church door, everything changed." The church cheered and clapped, but Grace wasn't finished. "I want to say something to every woman here who is enduring what I endured. Your life is not a sacrifice on the altar of a bad marriage. God did not call you to be a punching bag, and if you are too afraid to save yourself, then at least let someone know so they can help you." After service, 3 women came forward quietly. Each one had bruises hidden under long sleeves and makeup. Each one had been too ashamed to speak. But Grace's story gave them permission to break their silence. And that day, Pastor Johnson announced that Victory Chapel would be starting a support group for abused women. A safe space, a place to heal, and Grace would be leading it. Years later, Grace would stand at a conference, telling her story again. But this time, she wouldn't cry. She would stand tall, confident, whole. And she would end her speech with these words: "I am not a victim anymore. I am a victor. And if you are listening to this, and you are trapped in the same darkness I escaped from, hear me clearly. You are not alone. You are not crazy. You are not too broken to be fixed. The life you dream about, where you are free and whole and happy, it is not just a dream. It is a destination. And the journey starts with one brave step. Take that step. Your future self is waiting for you on the other side." Hi, besties. This story is dedicated to every woman who has found the courage to leave, every woman who chose her safety over society's expectations, and every woman who is still trying to find her voice. Dear sister, if you are reading this and you are trapped in an abusive relationship, please know that it is not your fault. You did not cause his anger. You cannot fix his brokenness, and you are not obligated to stay and be destroyed while hoping he will change. What lesson did you learn from this story? For me, it is that silence protects abusers, but truth sets captives free. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is save yourself, because God gave you one life, and He did not intend for you to spend it bleeding in secret. Kindly share this story with your loved ones. Give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel if you've not done so by now. Until I bring another story your way. Bye.